Hey, Mike, how we doing?
Hi, Paul. That's great. I'm doing great.
Excellent. I like the background. Very serene.
Thanks. Yeah. So I guess it'll just be me and you today. And so I'd like to do an interview if you feel you have time for it to get into
Oh,
some of the
certainly.
amazing stories, amazing details of your life. So this is kind of like my first attempt at a podcast, basically, where I'm interviewing a lot of different people and having a lot of different conversations around, well, I'm calling it Ascension workers. So really, I feel like it is a process of work that we have to do to ascend together as a community, as a collective. We're working on the job of raising consciousness as much as we can on Earth. So I feel like, um, I I see some similarities between me and you in that you were very called to um, eh, start your own local discussion group around the subject of ETs and UFOs, and you've had your own contact experiences. And I've been very appreciative of all the stories you've shared. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background and how did you first feel like you were starting to awaken to the subject of ETs and UFOs?
Yeah, it actually goes back a long, long time. Let's see, how would I start this? Probably about 1972, when I was about 7 years old or so. Friend and I I grew up in Long Island, New York, and just jumped out of the pool. We went to the front of the house to wait for the ice cream man. And basically, we just looked up, and out of nowhere, a large silver disc shaped object appeared on top of my neighbor's home. And we were little kids. We were just looking at it like, what the hell is that? Made no noise. It was about the size of the house. And it just hovered there. And then it kind of slowly moved from right to left. And we kind of chased it. And then as we went down the road, when we got to the end of the block, it just disappeared a million miles an hour. Just zip, like as it always, as you always hear from people's stories. Just there it was there, and then it was gone. So it was quite interesting because I was a young kid, didn't really know what was going on. And then we went back to the house, my friend and I, and we just told everybody. And who knows? I don't even remember what happened, but that was the end of that. Um,
And how old were
many,
you
many.
then?
I was probably about seven. I believe it was 1972. It
And did
was
you continue
interesting
to
too.
talk about that with those particular friends? Did you have any bond with those friends who saw it?
I did, and the funny thing was about him, with the guy I saw it with, was he. Let's see, how do we remember this now? So basically, he didn't live in New York at the time. He was visiting his my next door neighbor, which was his relatives. So many years went by, and then I actually saw him. Kind of reunited with him, probably about, let's say, 10, 12 years in the future. And it was kind of funny because over those years, I mean, I started to, I remember the event, but then I questioned myself, was this a real event or was it just a dream? And then I reunited with this kid at his grandmother's funeral. And the first thing I remember asking him was, "Hey, Tom, do you remember we were little kids and we saw that spaceship or whatever that thing was over our neighbor's house?" And he said, "Yeah, you remember that?" I said, "Do you remember that?" And he's, "Yeah." So now it became clear that this was a real event. And it was kind of funny too, because now we're 18, 19 years old, and we started to talk about different things. And he starts telling me that, when I was a kid, I used to have this reoccurring dream that I was floating over your front yard. And I said, that's amazing, because I used to have the same recurring dream that I was floating. It was like I was out of my body. And he mentioned my lamppost, which is like a light in front of the neighborhood. And I used to basically just float like I was out of my body as a little kid. And I always remembered the dream because it was fun. I liked it. And when he said it, I was kind of shocked. So that was my first basically introduction into UFOs. Somebody reached out. I mean, they showed up in front of my house in a giant spaceship. Now this is funny too, because probably about 2 years ago, I'm sitting in my home in Florida, and something in my head said, "Google your experience in 1972." So I listened, and sure enough, I it was in the newspapers that a large UFO disc-like object was seen hovering over the highway there. People got out, they looked at it, so it was a pretty big event, and it just happened to be in 1972. So it was funny here, 40 something, 50 years later in the future, that I'm getting this message in my head to Google the event. And sure enough, it was documented that many, many people in New York saw that spaceship. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
It's almost seems like there's possibly something that's shifted where there's fewer sightings like that occur in where it's very low to the ground and a lot of people are able to see it. I'm not sure if that relates to agreements between governments or the way that the Air Force is handling the situation. That's my speculation, though, that it seems like you hear more of those stories from the 50s, 60s, and 70s than you do from the 80s, 90s. Although we do hear some amazing stories from people in our meetings of very similar close encounters. It's just usually it's not mass sightings so much as it used to be, I guess.
Well, I don't know. I haven't seen any that was the first time I really ever saw it. Well, maybe twice, but that was the most distinct object that I've ever seen. Ever since then, it's been a lot of balls of light, a lot of orbs. And since I met you guys, I mean, I'm sure Mark's been telling you about it. We every time we've been together, we've been seeing a lot of crazy stuff. We went to I don't know if you saw my post, but we went to Skinwalker Ranch 2 weeks ago. Couldn't see anything. I mean, you get to the gate in Utah, and then we got yelled at by the there was like a voice came over the loudspeaker that says, "You are trespassing, and we have you on video." So me and my Mark and my wife, we just left. But when we went back to the hotel, we were sitting, looking up at the sky. It was getting close towards sunset, and we saw an orb. And my wife said, "Oh, look at that! Is that Venus?" And I said, "No, Venus is not even up yet." Or actually, Venus was already up, but it was to the left. So the orb was there for about 3 or 4 seconds, and then it disappeared. Mark captured something on video, but it might have just been birds. But at least we got to see something over in that area.
Yeah, yeah. Orbs are very mysterious. How many sightings there are, and how they seem to be able to come in and out of our reality, and we just like I'll see orbs sort of randomly when I'm not expecting it. Even when we're having our discussion meetings, I'll sometimes see orbs floating in the middle of a very translucent color, not completely solid or radiant, but there'll be a translucent orb floating in between people who are talking. And so I don't know if that's a different kind of life form than the kind that we see is more bright and vibrant in the sky, that seems like it could be a craft, or maybe craft that has shrunk itself down into a ball or something like that. Yeah, it's a lot of speculation for me.
Yeah, it's and obviously the military is seeing these things now. They're all of a sudden, putting them on TV and showing everybody what they've captured on video. As soon as I got to Colorado, I saw an orb. It was kind of like "Welcome to Colorado," and this thing went. It was in the east, and it went to the left quick and to the right quick. And I got it on video, and my friend analyzed it. He's a computer guy, and he's like, "Yeah, it's pretty compelling. I mean, there's no engines, there's no sound, and the way the movement was, and it was during the day." And then since I've been here, I've probably seen like 20 different things already, so with you guys mostly, and with our group. And we did a CE5 up at Kevin's house about a month ago. It was freezing up there, and we did the meditation. And as soon as I opened my eyes, the orb was right there. It was knocking on my door.
I guess I could share for people who are not familiar. So basically, I host a meetup group in Colorado Springs called the ET Disclosure and Contact. If you live in Colorado, you can come visit us. There's a discussion group, and there's a CE5 meditation that I host monthly. And so we've been doing those at different locations around Colorado Springs. And lately, we've been getting some interesting sightings. Certainly, the last one we had, it was south of Colorado Springs. I had a contact which felt very special to me, that was very full of love, with seeing the light in the sky. And it moved in a way that it was not a straight line, but I can't describe it. It felt like a brush stroke, and I saw it several times over a 1 minute period. And it feels like, there's so many ways in which they can manifest. But although there does seem to be um, some restriction to how long they show up for. I don't know if it's related to people's free will that they don't want to make anyone afraid if they do anything too anomalous for people who are not ready for it yet. That's something I've always wondered. But there's endless speculation about what's going on with CE5 events, I know. And some people think you need to meditate, some people think you don't need to meditate. And I'm of the opinion it just matters if you're of the right vibration and you're not going to be negatively affected by it. Then positive beings, I feel, can give us the catalyst and inspiration that we need to continue in some elevated way in our own lives. And I think that's a part of the increase in consciousness is that these contact experiences are allowed to increase.
I'll tell you, I mean, the spaceship sighting for me was amazing back in the day. But in 1990, I think I told you a long time ago, I saw this ball of light, again, orb, and it came in front of my face. It was like 20 feet away. And that changed my life. That actually opened me up to becoming a spiritual person. Like something from out there showed me who I am on the inside. And I started to research this and that. But seeing
Could
this
you give the full
object.
details there? How did that start? That
Yeah, so in
experience?
1990, I was, and actually even 6 months before, I started writing like poems about UFOs and how they're going to take me up one day on their ship when something happens. And then 6 months later, in December of 1990, I basically came outside. I was in Florida, South Florida, and about 2:30 in the morning, I was totally straight, no drugs, no alcohol, and just I used to always look up at the sky anyway. I used to like to hopefully see a meteor or something, and then sure enough, I see a meteor, boom, and then 2 seconds later, I see this glowing orb about the size of a small basketball appear again on top of my neighbor's house, which is pretty close. And I'm staring at this thing like, what the hell is that? I've never really seen anything before or since, or before, I should say. And then it kind of came, it was like it was moving very weird, no noise. And it was like a heartbeat monitor going like up and down, like you see like the doo, 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 doo. And basically this thing, it's hard to describe, but it was like I would say pulsating or just there. And it literally, if it was 20 feet from me, it was a lot. I mean, I almost like reach out and touch it, and it was just going up and down, up and down. But when it went up and down, you didn't see the up and down movement. It was up, then it was down, then it was up, then it was down. But there was no, you didn't see it move. It was kind of like interdimensional, like it was there for a second, and now it was on the bottom. And this lasted for about maybe 6 or 7 minutes. And then slowly it just moved very, very slowly to my left. And then just before it hit this tree, it disappeared. So I stood there in awe. I didn't know what I was seeing. I wasn't even thinking UFO at that point. I had no idea what it was. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't a bug. It was dark. It was nighttime. Nobody with a flashlight. It was just a floating ball of light. And then the next day when I woke up, I was like a new person. I had like this ravenous quest to learn. 4 things were in my mind. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? And what am I supposed to do while I'm on this planet? So I started to read and read and read and read. And then I started to meditate. And somebody told me in my mind, like, start writing down your dreams. So I did. And then it was 20 years of just wonderment of dreams, writing down. And then I was seeing things. And the meditation was really helpful. I think that was like the main thing. I was learning to, calm down and just relax and just, just be. And then I was again. They were showing up again, and I saw them with a couple of people. I saw a ship one time, same location in South Florida, had like portholes. It was like 5:30 in the afternoon, and I remember this very clearly because it was like a ship that I saw, and it had like these 5 little windows, and then it went away, and I ran inside to get my video camera, and sure enough, it actually came back, and and then it just disappeared. And my friend was there. I got it on video, but back then the video cameras were, not so good, and it was not the greatest lighting. But over the years, I've seen many, many objects in Florida with people, and then I was traveling a lot, and I saw a whole bunch of things in Sedona. So it just continued, and here we are. Since 1990, was at 33 years later, and I mean, I must have like 1,000 times I've seen these things. I eventually moved to another home in Florida, and my backyard was like a hot spot. I don't know what was going on over there, but as soon as I got there, I started seeing weird flashes in the sky and strange things. And then I had people over, and they all saw it too. And it was just a continuation. In 1997, kind of actually going back, I had my first contact experience, basically, and I was on my way to a. Oh, actually, I think I told you guys in the meeting, but um, on a Friday morning, I basically had a dream, and in the dream, I woke up like out of my body on a beach, and I think it was California. It was kind of weird, but all of a sudden, in front of me, I saw this stuff like from Star Trek. Remember, these the Scotty beam me up, like they were dematerializing on the Star Trek show. Well, I saw this stuff, which was like material or whatever, and all of a sudden it came. It turned into a man, and when he turned into a man, he had this like energy coming out of him, like this love energy. And he said, "In my mind, we're going to contact you. We're going to contact you." He says, "We are the Pleiadians of the interdimensional angelic realm. You're a part of our grouping." I'm like, okay, great. Sounds great. I mean, I don't know who you are or what you are, but the energy coming out of this guy was very interesting. It was just like love. It was like divine almost. And I felt very, really nice being around him. And then he disappeared. And then that Sunday, I had contacted the Florida Sun Sentinel newspaper probably 9 months before, saying that I'm going to start a public discussion group on UFOs and ETs, and just to give people a place to talk and share their stories and stuff like that. And the reporter wanted to do an interview on me, and I'm like, nah, I don't want to do that. I'm just contacting the paper, and I put a little blurb back there and let people know that we're going to be at this hotel. So he ended up contacting me a few months after. He says, "Listen, I really want to do an interview on you. It's a very popular subject back then. The X-Files was very popular in 1998, so forth. It was 1998, I believe." So anyway, long story short, so I ended up, okay, I agreed. The guy came to my house, spoke to me for about 2 hours, and ended up shaking my hand and saying, "Thanks for not being crazy." And I'm like, okay. I was a mental health therapist at the time. I used to help people, and I knew I'm not crazy as far as I understood. And I was just giving people an open format to speak about their experiences, to make, connections and see what would come from it. So this weekend, I wake up on a Sunday morning, 2 days after I just met this Pleiadian guy, and my face, my name, and my phone number is on the front page of a Sunday, the main newspaper there. And it said, in Florida, like, who are you going to call in South Florida if you see a UFO? And me. And the guy did such a good interview, article on me. He didn't make me look crazy. He actually made me look very good. He could have destroyed my life, but he didn't. He found it very interesting. And so now it's Sunday morning, and my phone is ringing off the hook, and I'm on this in the newspaper, and people are calling, and I'm like, "What's going on?" And my mom's like, "You're in the newspaper." And I go next door, and I get the newspaper, and sure enough, there's my face and my phone number. So now radio stations are calling, and people are calling, and they're telling me all kinds of stuff, and I'm like, "This is amazing." So a radio station had called, and they wanted me to come visit them on. Actually, let me jump back. So this is Sunday morning. So Sunday evening, I go to my parents' house for dinner, and we're talking. And my father is like an old retired police officer, military guy, and not really into this kind of stuff, and not really spiritual, just a hardcore kind of great person, loving man, but just not a spiritual person at all. And we're talking about my article and how the it looks in the newspaper. And so I said, it's amazing. I had a really interesting dream the other night. So my father says, "Well, interesting you say that. So did I." So I let him talk, and he starts describing the exact experience that I just had. He woke up in his dream, and he was on a beach, and all of a sudden this stuff turned into a man, and he ended up having a conversation with this guy. And he said, he actually decided to retire and live his life. And, and he ended up doing that. And I said, "Describe the guy." He says, "Well, because I didn't tell you before, but my guy looked like he had this like blue suit on, and like gray hair, and like goggles over his eyes." And my father described the exact same being. "Oh yeah, this guy had a blue suit on and gray hair and goggles." And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, "Dad, I can't believe you just said that, because I was just about to tell you the same experience that I had." He says, "Really?" I said, you saw the same being that I did. He said, yes, I guess I did. So he ended up deciding to retire, which was really cool.
Was that something
So
that was
now
discussed by this person in the dream that he had?
it was the same exact, he described the same exact being and how it actually, showed up in his dream out of nowhere. Kind of
Did it
like
give him a message too?
his message was, you should retire and just go live your life.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, he was working for like 35 years already as a police officer. And so he ended up listening and he did retire. And the interesting thing was, so now about, the radio stations were calling me, asking me to come on, and TV stations. And so I ended up saying, okay, I'm going to go to visit this radio station on Friday. So Friday comes, I drive about an hour to a place called West Palm Beach, and I get there, and the manager says, "I'm sorry, we can't do the interview today. The guy was sick. Could you come back another day?" Yeah, no problem. So I go home and I actually go back to sleep. So now I wake up in my house, and I'm out of my body, and in my house are, let's say, five beings, for lack of a better term, and they kind of look like me. They look human. They had like long hair. I had long hair at the time, and a beard, a mustache, and kind of like had like camping gear on. And the energy coming out of this was just magnified. It was like this gentleman from 5 days ago, but now it's all this love energy coming out of these beings. And they kept saying in my mind, we are the Pleiadians of the interdimensional angelic realm. You are part of our grouping, and we're going to contact you and work with you. And, they said a whole bunch of stuff, but something like, when the shift happens in the future, you're going to be like helping out. And I'm like, okay, that all sounds great, but I'm seeing my body on my bed, like kind of like through my wall. So I'm out of my body and these beings are in my house. And I'm like, well, I don't understand. How am I here talking to you, but my body is over there? It didn't make any sense. I didn't understand. I never really understood my out of body experience like that. And they said something to the effect that, I don't know what they said, but they kind of like touched my out of body or whatever. And now I was doing like telekinesis. I was moving stuff with my mind. They were teaching me how to use my mind for certain things. So I remember lifting my TV up with my mind, and bottles and stuff like that. It was the most amazing, unbelievable experience I probably ever had before or since. And then when I woke up, I'm looking around. I'm like, was that a dream? Was that real? I mean, I can't believe it. This was like unbelievable. So I wrote it down, and then a lot of cool stuff were happening after that. In my house at the time, I had a friend who was living with me, and I was in my kitchen. I mean, something touched me on my arm, and I was awake, and it was felt like a beautiful, just light touch on my arm, kind of like somebody was letting me know that they were there. And then I told my friend, and 20 minutes later, he said, something just happened to me. I felt the same thing. And he was actually kind of going through the same experience as I was, seeing stuff in the sky. And it was kind of like a parallel friendship. Everything that was happening was to me was also happening to him. And then we would travel to Sedona together, and we saw some spaceships there. But the third dream was basically myself, my friend, and the 7 foot tall looking warrior looking guy. And we were walking around a school where I grew up in New York. And he didn't say anything to me that I remember. But the next day when I woke up, I said, hey, I had one of those dreams again with one of those Pleiadians. He said, oh my God, so did I. I said, what happened to you? He says, well, you, me, and some 7 foot tall warrior looking guy were walking around some school area. I said, dude, that's exactly what happened to me. So he was actually in the experience, in the dream with me, with this being, and he described the same thing that I did. So this all happened within like a few month period of my father and myself in the newspaper. So it was very just amazing experience for me.
You feel like that was like programmed into your incarnation, that you agreed to be of service in a particular way? Do you feel like they were activating you for your mission in some way?
It seemed to be. It seemed that they were saying that to some future mission that I'm going to be, helping people. And I've always been a helper kind of a person anyway. I've always kind of like tried to help people, and ended up becoming a therapist to try to help people. But even without the educational that, I've always been there to try to help people. So it seems that they were preparing me for something. And they said something about the shift in the future. And then this is another interesting thing that I just reminded myself of. Um, I was telling a friend about some recent experiences that I had, And she says, "Oh, you should go have a reading with my friend. She's very spiritual, and she goes and channels, and she always tells people some pretty cool things." So I'm like, "Oh, yeah, set that up. I'd like to do that." So even before this meeting took place, I had a dream, and I was given 3 words, and the 3 words were "seek the mystic." I wrote it down: "seek the mystic." So now I ended up meeting this. It's just a dream. I wrote these 3 words down. Another week goes by, and I ended up meeting this lady. And I didn't really tell my friend who set this thing up too much, so she couldn't tell anybody what just happened to me. I just told her some basic stuff. So I get to this other lady's house, and she starts questioning me. And within like 3 or 4 minutes, she goes from a regular woman talking to starts channeling, and her voice changed, and she became very monotone. And she said, "We are the Pleiadians of the interdimensional realm, and you are part of us. And you're going to be helping people with the when the shift happens." And she starts telling me all kinds of different things, and I'm like, I'm just amazed because nobody ever knew a week before that I just met these other Pleiadian beings who use the same word. We are the Pleiadians of the interdimensional angelic realm,
Very
and
specific.
you're part of the grouping, whatever that means. And then I asked her questions about my friend, and I asked her questions. Actually, I asked her about what was that thing I saw when I was a child, the first spaceship. And she says, "Well, you could have climbed, you could have went on that ship, but you didn't at that time." So that was a real event she kind of related to me. And I'm like, "What is the connection with my friend?" And she says, "Oh, you, my friend, who I keep experiencing these things where she said, you and him were placed here thousands of years ago." Again, I don't even know what that means. I was placed on Earth thousands of years ago. I don't know. It was just so overwhelming. I couldn't even like ask like good questions. It was like, how does this person even know what I'm talking about with these Palladians? And then she said something to the effect, again, this is like 25, 27 years ago. She said something to the effect that, yeah, when the shift happens, you should be looking in the Colorado area to live. And that's kind of what compelled me to come out here so many years later. Things had to happen, and I ended up a business that I ended up taking over this marijuana company that just happens to be in Colorado. So it all kind of like, here I am. And everything from there. And then, like I said, I was compelled to start my own public discussion group that people were showing up, and all kind of strange experiences, great stories, several similar stories to mine. Actually, something just popped into my head too. So my ball of light experience was in 1990, and then in 1992, a movie came out with John Travolta called Phenomena. And basically, in the movie, he goes outside, he looks up at the sky, and it's on his birthday. And my experiences was pretty close to my birthday in 1990 in December. And in the movie, he looks up, sees this strange flash of light, and it kind of knocks him down. He wakes up, and now his whole life is changed instantly. He starts reading, and he starts acquiring knowledge like me. I read like 600 books in like a year. I couldn't stop. I wanted to know everything, again, relating to spirituality and UFOs and ancient history and archaeology and everything there is to know about who we are, where we came from, where we're going. What am I supposed to do? That was the I guess the knowledge that they wanted me to learn. In the movie, John Travolta, he's doing the same thing. And when I'm watching this movie, I'm like, I can't believe this movie is happening. This happened to me, and now there's a movie about it. I mean, so now I'm realizing that this is obviously happening to other people around the world, and it wasn't just me. So it was really cool coincidence. And then, like I said, I had my own public discussion group probably 8 years later because of the article in the newspaper. And then I remember one guy, he came from upstate New York, and he brought this wood carving, and in the wood carving was this spaceship, and it was a man and a dog looking at the ship, and that's what he remembered. Him and his dog were upstate New York. All of a sudden, this object and the thing that he created in the woodcut was exactly what I saw. This disc-shaped object that looked like the Billy Meyer ships. And it was actually too, because Billy Meyer was pretty popular in the early 70s. And that's when he was having his experiences. And then here, this man was upstate New York in the early 70s, and he saw this disc, and it so inspired him. He actually made this wood carving, and he put the spaceship in there. So he's relating his story. I'm getting goosebumps because he's he's describing, and he brought this thing that was exactly what I saw. My wife is cooking. So the group was just amazing because everybody was, sharing their experience. And that was the whole point. Like you do, you want to hear from a person over here, and let's see what the person over there says, and let's see what the coincidences are. Let's see who's actually having the same. So anyway, so everybody was, sharing their experiences. We were making a lot of connections. And then this one girl, I remember, she actually had this something in her thumb, and I had something kind of like in my thumb. And we actually went to a doctor to take x-rays of it, and we didn't find anything in there, but it was just a strange coincidence. But a lot, like I said, a lot of people were sharing their experiences, and that was the whole point of the groups. And we did it for a couple of years in different places and stuff like that.
Yeah, I could ask you some questions more since you've seen the what it's like in Colorado Springs here, and I've always wondered if it's basically the same thing everywhere. If you find people who are abductees who talk about being taken on ships, or we talk about stories from when they were young, talk about the the imaginary friends who aren't actually imaginary, they're actually beings, and or the missing time stories. People seem to be driving in their car, they see something, and then next thing they know, it's a different period of time.
A lot of people shared exactly that. That was the interesting thing, because I was also not only doing groups, I was actually going to people's homes, because just to privately and talk with them privately. And I met a couple who are, just ordinary people. The wife was a teacher, the husband was an engineer, and they had nobody else to talk to back then. But they knew I was doing these groups, so somebody contacted, me from them, and I went to their home, and they started to tell me their story, and kind of blew me away, because they were like, we don't even know how to begin. But one night they were paralyzed in their bed, and their children were being taken, and the kids were basically telling their parents about, meeting their new friends, and they were very, very small and childlike. And then one of them, they were like floating out the window, and then they were brought back to their room, and the parents were like stuck in their bed. They couldn't even move. And like the next day, they found tree branches in the kid's bed. As the kid was being returned back to the bedroom, she grabbed a hold of a leaf or a tree branch and brought it back to the bed. I mean, how do you explain that? And it was repeatedly. And then I started to question them. And it turns out that her mother, the wife's mother, and the grandmother, they were having experiences. And there was another lady too that showed up. I remember her, she was very nice. This lady called Olive. And Olive was telling me she was from New Jersey, and she was abducted many, many times. Didn't so much have missing time, but it turns out, again, her family was being taken. Her mother was an abductee, her children and the grandchildren. So it was this generational thing going on. Those are some of the ones that stood out in my mind. And there's another gentleman I met from somebody in one of those groups. And one of the coolest things he told me was he was abducted since he was a child. And he actually, at first he was afraid, but then he kind of got warmed up to them, and he realized that they're not here to hurt him. And they ended up, teaching him about many different things. But the most compelling thing that he told me was one time in his mind, they showed him every single life he ever had on this earth, going back to when he was a monkey. I was like, what? I mean, it was amazing. He said it was the most amazing thing. Like, I saw all my previous lives, and I was a monkey at first, and then they merged with me, and and then I became a human. And then every single lifetime that he had on this earth, he got to see in his mind. That was pretty cool. And he was pretty legitimate. He was actually in a couple of documentaries. I forgot his name now. He was on TV a couple of times after that. Then I was going to the UFO conferences. I met Dr. Roger Lear, who he passed away now. But if you remember him, he was a podiatrist, but he got interested because people were going to him, and they had these foreign objects in their body, and he actually surgically removed a few implants. And I met this guy, and I sat down with him at the conference, and we had a great conversation. He wasn't a UFO enthusiast. He just happened. To. I don't know how it got into it, but he was removing these implants, and when they got them, You couldn't cut into them. They were like some kind of biological little, very small little object, but it compelled him to start getting into the UFO abduction thing, and people would tell him their stories, and he remembered them saying that, yeah, I was taken on board, and they implanted me, and they stuck something up my nose, and they stuck something in my toe or my finger, and sure enough, through technology, he actually removed these things. That was pretty cool. A lot
Yeah.
of interesting stories over the years, for sure.
Yeah, it's amazing how much evidence there is that's actually physical that people have now, that it's like the mainstream just can't handle it yet. But I guess hopefully we're ramping up to a point where people can begin to be open-minded more. I think that's happening now.
I agree. In 30 years, and I've been involved in this, I mean, so many things have come on TV, all these documentaries, and then you have the NASA videos, then you have the government videos. So it seems that we've obviously changed. The shift has taken place into the attitude of Earth. You ask anybody out there, any kid, any adult, about aliens, and years ago they didn't believe it. I think the last poll they did, like 75% of people polled totally believe we're not alone. Aliens have been coming here forever. And now the government has finally started to put out their own videos, and they're telling you, we don't know where these things come. They're not made from Earth. They're not ours. NASA just had some public discussion group the other day. I mean, they have some great video of objects showing up right next to the space station and then taking off. So finally, it's coming out there, and maybe we're getting closer. And I was also told, I think I told you a while ago, that I was told many years ago there's going to be a gradual and then an all at once. Well, we've seen definitely a gradual change in Earth, and now we're just waiting for the all at once, whatever that's going to be. I don't know, the shift of the poles, or I don't know.
So
We'll
this was
find out.
something that was communicated by these, I guess, the interdimensional angelic realm Pleiadians when you first were hovering out of your body, and they told you about a shift that was happening, but they didn't say what this meant in the physical dimension. They just meant that it was a spiritual shift.
I don't really remember, but it was some kind. They just used the word shift. When the Earth will shift upwards, the ascension process will begin. Something like that. An ascension process will begin. So I took it more as like a physical shift, but it could be a combination of the spiritual with the physical, a gradual, and then all at once.
So the implication is that there's a gradual shifting, and then there's an all at once shifting that happens at some point in the gradual time frame.
I believe so. And then years later, NASA was talking about how the poles of the Earth are going to be potentially shifting and changing. And there was a map back then, like in America after the shift, and it showed like the oceans coming into almost the center of the country on both sides. And that's why Colorado was kind of safe, because we're kind of like in the middle of the country there. The oceans wouldn't get that far in, and the mountains would stop any water. And that's kind of why she was saying, like, Colorado will be a good place for you to be. So yeah, maybe the Earth will actually shift on its axis, which it has done before. And then they know the precession of the equinoxes happens every like 26,000 years or something, and maybe that's that next shift that they were talking about, a physical Earth shift. And if the physical Earth shifts, our minds will be aligned to a different frequency in the universe if our whole planet moves. So maybe they were relating to something like that.
Yeah. There have been many different stories of the ascension that are said in a way that I would call veiled. I don't think they want to inspire any fear in people, and I think it may not. The physical things don't even really matter compared to the spiritual things, in the sense that if we have to die, we can just take on a new body, and we'll continue in the way that we need to, or the way that we want to, with the natural flow of reincarnation cycles. It's just what body do we need, and are we ready for an upgraded body? I think that there's a chance that the younger kids being born today definitely have more spiritual openness. Maybe their genetics are already shifting where they're more able to tap into psychic phenomenon. And I'm very excited for my son to see how much he can telepath and that kind of thing.
Yeah, you should question them too as they're growing. Ask them questions before they get like socialized. I used to always ask my nephew when he was young about different things and see if he remembered anything. Never nothing too compelling, but yeah, this earth is now, the people reincarnating supposedly are for that next generation. They're much more precocious, they're much more open-minded, they're coming in with information. So obviously this planet is in turmoil. Maybe it's always been in turmoil, and maybe it's going to continue in turmoil. I don't know anymore, but I just keep going day by day. But it does seem that we're heading towards something that will be very beneficial to the earth. I never lived in any kind of fear about it. I always thought that a spaceship was going to take me off this planet, and then they kind of told me that basically, and then it'll settle down, and we'll come back, and we'll be part of a new Earth. That's kind of why I like Rebecca and Austin, how they're planning on, being sustainable and creating the foods and all that. And I
Yeah.
would love to, eventually be a part of like a community. We buy some property out there in the middle of Colorado. We're all of like mind. I like that. When I met you guys and I started to speak with them, and it just kind of piqued my interest. And it seems that would be a great thing. Come together, everybody starts working together instead of against each other, that self-sustaining mentality, spiritually minded, love everybody. I've always kind of been like that. I was never much of a bigot or a racist. I always accepted everybody. I was very open-minded from a young person, and I've always kind of lived my life that way. And then when all these experiences, it even became like I call myself a child of the all. I don't really, adhere to the religions, but the spiritual side, the connection to everything is very apropos and works for me.
Yeah, it definitely seems like there's a natural calling amongst spiritual communities to sort of create their own way of doing things, but we're not quite there as a society yet, where we're very focused on growing very sustainable methods of agriculture. Um, but it's amazing how many people of all belief systems are wanting to create these kinds of communities, where there'd be more of a focus on spiritual pursuit and healing and openness to everyone. It seems like it's an inevitability that we're going to be out in the mountains somewhere, I think, with that community one day. So
I like it. Yeah,
yeah, I'm
I think it's
excited.
really cool.
Do you feel like you've been guided your whole life by some particular force or entity, or just your intuition?
Hmm. Yeah, I think so. Actually, I know so because like a lot of times I'll be on trips and I'll say, "Okay, Spirit, take me where I need to go," and then all of a sudden, like something just happens. I end up in this place that I didn't even know about. So definitely, I feel that I've been guided through many things, and things always showed up when I needed them to, and I reached out probably when I was a young kid, about 19. I was kind of upset living in Florida. Just before everything really happened, and I kind of yelled up at the sky, like, "Hey, God, either you kill me or you show me the way, because I don't really know what I'm supposed to do here." And then that night, I saw a UFO, strange light in the sky, and then things started to happen. And then one of the first things that happened was I met somebody, and he basically was going to take me to an Indian guy who does like readings and spiritual stuff. And from then on, I've definitely been guided. I've always ended up meeting those people who were like me or like-minded. And but yeah, it always seemed to like one thing led to another. Like I kept meeting people who introduced me to somebody else, and I was able to help them. And there's definitely a guiding force that's been with me, and it's been very positive. I never had any kind of fear of these beings. I've seen grays in my dreams, and they've done some things to me maybe, but I never really felt like I was abducted. And then when the Pleiadians came, there's such a difference in the energy, but I never have any kind of fear. I always call myself like a contactee as opposed to an abductee. And whatever, maybe they did do stuff to me when I was younger, but I never had that fear about it. I was always very open-minded to it all, as I am today.
Mhm. So maybe it'd be worth it to talk about dreams a little more too. So it's interesting that you've had a lot of flying dreams where you're out of. It seems like when we're asleep, we're out of body. But with this other experience you had, you seem to be out of body and awake, and very aware that you were out of body, and you could see your body while you're in that state. But I've also had experiences where it seems like there was a transition where I was asleep and out of body, and then I woke up and I was awake and out of body. And I was wondering if you had anything like that, But then just the nature of dreams in general is very mysterious. Do you have any thoughts on, where you're going when you're having these experiences?
I've been everywhere. I used to wake up. I used to call it an instance of awareness where I realized I wake up in this dream and I realized that I was out of my body. A couple of times I saw my body on my bed and I was playing with it. Like I remember waking up and I knew I was sleeping, but I was awake, and I put my hand through my wall because I knew I could. And then I put my head through my wall, and then I knew it because I could. And then I actually left my house, and then I came back right through my wall. And I woke up and I'm like, whoa, that was pretty cool. So I would wake up in these experiences with this instance of awareness where I was aware. And I've seen beings of all kinds of colors and natures, and birds and lion creatures, and just a whole multitude of different kind of entities out there. And I would wake up on planets, and I sometimes I would jump off the planet because I knew I could, like in the Matrix movie when he was forced to jump off the building. So I used to literally fly like light speed, and sometimes I'd wake up in dreams, and then I'd change my location. I'd say, "Oh, okay, look, since I'm awake, I have control. Let's go somewhere else. Let's go to a red rock area, a mountain area." Instantaneously, now I'm in some other location. So I ended up, because I was writing down my dreams every day and I was so aware, I was sleeping a lot because my dreams were more exciting than my waking state. And I would wake up and I'd write down 6, 7, 8 dreams in vivid. I still have them. I should publish it because they're amazing to me. But the messages and the beings that I met and the experiences just were amazing, and they never stopped. Even to this day, I still have some pretty wild dreams. But for a 20-year period, which I wrote down my dreams, they were always, just amazing to me because of the experiences and the feeling that I would when I woke up, with the ability to remember it all. And I was given names and numbers and all kinds of different things. And I would show up at other people's homes and like, hey, I'm out of my body. Can you see me? And they never did. But I had such control. I would like lift up my hands, and now I was like hovering wherever I was, and I could turn and move, and I can go fast or slow. The dreams were very, very important in my growth. I would think, because I guess the confidence it gave me in this dream state.
I've certainly had periods where I was writing down my dreams every day, and I noticed that if I would read my dreams, like in the evening, if I'd go back and read what I wrote down in the morning, then it would be like an explanation of the metaphysics of what had happened to me that day. Now, I do think there might be a difference between different types of dreams that have different types of purposes. Some showing more prophetic things, some showing more what's going on in the metaphysical dimensions. I think that's kind of like clues to our spiritual path when we interpret the symbolism of the dreams. But then, yeah, I know there's different categories of dreams too that doesn't always apply. But the amount of information that I gain when I read them later seems to be more than when I think about the dream after I first had it, because it seems like the dream is like an invitation for me to a kind of processing. Whenever it is that I'm reading it and processing it, it's like there's always a lot of value there. So
Yeah,
I'd be interested in those dreams.
I was definitely given a lot of like prophecy. Like I wrote down these things, and then they came true, which was pretty cool because I would go back to my dream book, and I read, and then sure enough, I wrote it down. Actually, I wanted to say before with the dream I had was from my friend. It said I was given 3 words. It said, "Seek the mystic." I don't even know what that was. A mystic. I don't know what a mystic was, but 3 words. And then a week later, I meet this woman. So now, about a year later, I'm going through my dream book, and sure enough, I come across this dream that said, "Seek the mystic," and I did. And then she's the one who told me about the Pleiadians and the interdimensionals and all that. So it was like somebody guided me again, and I actually wrote it down. So the dreams were always prophetic. They're always, trying to help me. A lot of weird stuff too. You get a lot of weird stuff in there, but it was always very important information for me to, to understand and to glean, and then to help other people. Obviously, so a lot of other people weren't so comfortable with the experiences, Where for me, it was very natural. And even to this day, it's like, I love it.
Yeah.
I think I flew last week and I was, oh, thank you.
So do you feel like that this would be a higher self that's guiding you? Do you feel like you have an awareness of higher and lower aspects of yourself?
It's hard to say. I mean, there's some kind of energy or being that seems to be with me, or, just, I don't know who it is or what it is, if it's me or a higher or lower self. I'm not really sure. It's hard to say, but it seems that these beings have been with me since childhood, and they definitely, lent a helping hand. Anytime I was ever in trouble in life, like all of a sudden I got out of trouble really quick. Like my car broke down in the snow like a few months ago, and I asked for guidance and help, and then sure enough, somebody shows up out of nowhere and helped me. I've always helped people too, so it's kind of like that balance. But it seems like there's another entity or being of some kind that's been with me and helping me through these, through my life for sure.
Maybe I could ask you a little bit about how how your career has gone too. It's so cool that you have a cannabis company here in Colorado Springs that is helping a lot of people I know. And my relationship with cannabis has been back and forth over the years, where I didn't know if it was, you know, bolstering aspects of my personality that were not helpful. But then I realized, well, that's just giving me insight into those aspects of my personality that I need to work on. I just need to process whatever it is. And I feel like it's amazing that we're in a state now where psilocybin mushrooms have been legalized too. It's as though, the free will of humanity has finally broken through the whatever controlling interest didn't want us to be using these plant medicines to heal ourselves, and now we're able to actually have more access. But how did you get into that industry?
Well, it was a long story, but I was a part of a company like 4 or 5 years ago that was I was a venture capital person. I used to raise money for companies, and I actually visited Colorado, and I went to this place in Colorado Springs, and we were one of the first investors, and then we got hired by the company to do public relations, investor relations, and then everything was good for a while. Then it all fell apart. It got messed up, and the company made some mistakes. And then I was a shareholder, so I rallied other shareholders, and we ended up raising some more money to take over the company because it was still in business. And long story short, I ended up taking over this company, and that's how I ended up in Colorado, because it's in Colorado Springs. It's actually been one of the most stressful things I've ever gotten myself involved in, because it was very tough, and still we're kind of like hanging on there. As far as the pot and the marijuana and stuff, I've been using this stuff for like 40 years. Did it help me? Did it hurt me? I don't know. I mean, I got into it. I felt good. I mean, it never seemed to stop me. I mean, all those experiences that I experienced in my dreams, I was using marijuana during the day, and I'd go to sleep, and it never seemed to interfere. Sometimes it actually makes me anxious now. It's so strong. I actually stopped doing it for a little while because I was getting stressed out with the company, and I was getting some anxiety. So sometimes it can help. Sometimes it could be a detriment, but it does seem to have you never heard of anybody dying from marijuana. Uh, Alcohol, and pills kills more people on a daily basis than everything combined. Never heard of anybody dying from marijuana. It definitely has its medicinal properties. It's just another great plant out there that's come from our creator. And like I said, it got me to Colorado. I've always wanted to come here, and she told me that years ago that I should be looking in Colorado. Just so happens this company happened to be here, and timing was good. My daughter was grown. My family's older. It's like I needed to get out of Florida anyway, and it got me here. And then, like I said, the first thing I wanted to do was find a group like yours and make some friends with open-minded people. Just so happens that that first night, Mark was compelled to go that night too. He's like my best buddy now. And you and the other guys, Julian and Randy. And I feel very comfortable always hanging out with everybody. I feel like it was the right move to come here. So,
Yeah.
day by day. But at this point, it's like we've seen so many things since we've got here. I mean, it never stops. We told you about 6 weeks ago, about five of us went to Garden of the Gods, and it was freezing. It was a very, very windy night. It was really cold. But we ended up seeing this object come out of the west and go to the east, and we all saw it. Lasted about like 9 minutes, and we kept thinking, like, is this a space station? No, because the space station actually goes the other direction. But it lasted so long. It was a ball of light, but it was very large. It was more of like a craft up there, but just an object. But here I am with my new buddies from my new UFO discussion group, seeing a spaceship of some kind that's moving erratically, and we're all just excited, and we're all just giggling like, I can't believe we're all seeing this together. So that being said, it's there's something going on here. I'm here for a reason, and I'm trying to figure out what that reason is. And at this point, it's like day by day. I don't expect anything. If they know where I'm at, and when they're ready for me, they'll come and maybe take me. And if they need me to help with the world, then they know I will definitely help that. I'm always open to helping anybody at any time.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing that so many people are being drawn here. I mean, I don't know if it's that way in other parts of the country, but it certainly seems like we get a very large number of people who move here specifically because they felt drawn here. They felt there's some kind of spiritual significance to their journey that they needed to come to Colorado.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about Colorado, but I mean, I've always wanted to come here. From the first time I came here, 30, 40 years ago, I was like, whoa, I fell in love with this place. And I always felt that one day I will be here. And now I'm here almost, closing in on 2 years. And like I said, as soon as I got here, I saw this object in the east. I keep seeing stuff. And, one day I was coming outside of my house. And I looked up and I saw a flash. And that's usually my sign. And then in my mind, somebody said, like, go to Garden of the Gods. I told my wife, I'm going to go. She didn't want to go. Ended up going by myself, sat there, put the chair down. Not even 5 minutes go by. I see the flash. And then when I see the flash, I know that I just decide to turn my chair and look in a different direction. And then I did that. 5 minutes later, they came back and they gave me 3 flashes and they disappear. So I'm like, thank you. So
Yeah.
I haven't really got any specific messages from anybody in a long, long time. But just seeing the flashes of light, the way they used to do it to be in Florida, tells me that I'm here for the right reasons. And then, when everything is going to unfold, as it still unfolds, I'll be able to, participate in whatever I'm supposed to be participating. Somebody just said something about a lot of people are, drawn to Florida. A lot of people, Florida is a very transient state. A lot of people get there and then they leave. The energy down there is very strange. There's a lot of people there now. It's a very distracting place. You don't have too many areas where you can see a clear sky. The light pollution is terrible. You have to really, get out of the area. I used to go in my backyard for some reason. It was a little darker than the average, but, a lot of people are drawn to Florida and then they're drawn out of there. They have to get out of there because the energies are very strange down there. It's very like a melting pot of all kinds of people from all around the world.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess I could recommend to people, if you're not on meetup.com, to use that for forming groups in your own area and see if you can find your own fellow light workers and seekers who are open to these things and having their own experiences. As that was really all I did was start a meetup group, and I had a couple friends that made it easier for me to get it going, knowing that you have at least somebody who's going to show up to start with. But it did not take long. And Colorado Springs has a few 100,000 people in it, and it's maybe a little bit easier here than a smaller town would be, maybe a lot easier. But if you can find a town with 100,000 people in it that you're close to, that's a great place to start a meetup group if there's not already an existing meetup group. And I know that there's so many people who cannot share their stories because all their friends and family think they're crazy, and it's almost like this is more the norm that people are having experiences and not able to share them, than that they have actual friends who they can talk to about these things. So that's why it's so critical, I think, that people find one another in communities to be able to sort of grow and come to peace and come to a sense of grounding with the reality of the visitations that are happening and our interaction with the star families, which seems to be maybe one of unity. Maybe we are these star brothers incarnated into these bodies, and we're here for the purpose of helping everyone else work through the transition, the shift that's happening, without any fear. So do you feel like you're a Pleiadian yourself, Paul?
Well, I mean, they told me I was. I mean, I know I'm just I call myself a child of the all, connected to everything, attached to nothing. You know, they're the ones who actually gave me this name, the Pleiadians. I never really, I mean, I guess before I met them, I was reading about different groups and stuff like that. But when you know when they give you the name, and then when I did that reading with the mystic lady, and she says, you know, we are part of the Pleiadians, and you're part of us, like we're like I'm a descendant of them. It kind of made sense. My last name is Cohen, as you know, and in the Torah, in the Bible, there's only two family names that were allowed to touch this Ark of the Covenant, where the Torah was held, and it was the Cohens and the Levites. And many, many years ago, I worked for a company that used to expose new technologies in a video form to like a business um, scenario. And I talked to a DNA company, and the guy says, "Oh, you're a Cohen, huh?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, I'm going to tell you something very interesting. We did a study, a DNA study on the Cohens and the Levites, and it says you and the Levites have different DNA than anybody else on this entire planet." I'm like, "What? What does that mean?" I'm like, "Does that mean like I'm an alien?" He says, "Well, we're not really sure, but you and the Levites have different DNA than any other family in the whole world." So in the Bible, it talks about the Genesis is like genetics, like the first couple of pages, the first couple of sentences. It says the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men and took them as wives. They had men of great renown. They were giants in those days. The Nephilim, the cherubim, the seraphim, which in Hebrew means those who come from above. So they're telling you that the extraterrestrials basically came here and merged their DNA with the DNA of the things that were already here, like the monkeys or whatever. And then there's a whole section called Numbers, and it names the names of the families, which would basically be the DNA of these beings. So that information is all in there. Nobody ever really looks at that, you know, as anything real. But you know, when somebody tells you that your DNA is different from anybody else in the world, and then the Bible's telling you that your family name was one of the only ones who could touch this ark, it was some kind of a machine, and that machine supposedly fed the people here for 40 years when they went through the deserts, according to the story of Moses looking to get into the promised land. So a lot of strange stuff like that. So, am I a Pleiadian? I don't know. I don't know what I am, but somebody keeps using that name, and I'm actually happy to be affiliated with these beings because the energy that like they extended to me was amazing. Good luck touching the ark. Somebody just wrote, yeah, you couldn't touch the ark back in the day because Uzziah or whatever his name was touched the ark and he died like instantaneously. He wasn't a Cohen. So a lot of strange things, but all the research I've ever done, and then all the stuff that Eric Von Daniken ever read, and all the stuff that Zachariah Sitchin and a host of other amazing people, they've done the research. They look back, the Sumerians and the technology that they came, and all these beings from thousands of years ago were so much more technologically advanced than what we have today. And all those buildings are still in existence to this day. So it's very compelling where we come from. I was convinced early on that, the extraterrestrials came here and, we're part.
There you
All
go.
these things have come out over the years of our, where we come from. And it seems that, again, they're not God. They're not the creator. When I look up at the sky and I see all those stars, whatever made that, I call, either the God or the creator or the source. So they were created like we were created, but it seems that they had a hand in helping us in our evolutionary growth as well. And that
Yeah.
seems to be documented in a lot of different ancient texts. You read stuff from like India, I mean, they'll tell you about 8,000 years ago, the wars and the technologies that everybody had back then. And you see some of the structures that are in India today. there's no way that primitive people could have made these things. I mean, they're like laser cut, everything's aligned to the stars. So I'm already 1,000% convinced that we are, from these higher beings. Again, they probably couldn't explain existence either. I mean, how do you make a sun? How do you make a star? How do you, a planet? It's beyond the finite mind of the man. But these beings, obviously, they're pretty technologically advanced if they're cruising around the universe in these ships that we now have video cameras that sees them all the time. So very compelling in that trail of our earthly existence.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's so many different sources discussing the genetic programs, and the Law of One books that I like so much. They talk about a grand experiment, and Corey Good's information said that the beings referred to the genetic projects as being part of a great experiment for basically just consciousness evolution in the galaxy, and the dots definitely seem to connect. That there's just, it's almost like what are we doing here as beings? We're exploring the nature of consciousness. We're exploring the nature of manifestation, and genetics are one way in which we express the nature of what life is and could be. And so it makes sense that as we grow as a race, we're becoming more and more able to co-create with genetics and co-create more of the reality that we're wanting to see through proper maintenance and stewardship of what it means to be alive and what life actually is. So I'm very hopeful that we'll know more of the mysteries of our genetics someday, and that it'll all point us back to the source of creation, basically.
Sure. Yeah, the people who actually discovered the DNA in the 50s and started to research it. One of the lead scientists basically said, there's no way in the world that this just randomly showed up. It's so complex, and it's so just beyond that. Obviously, intelligent design. It had to come from somebody who designed it, and we're just starting now to figure a lot of it out. But it's so far advanced that it just didn't randomly show up. And obviously there's an intelligent being behind it all. And it lets us try to figure it out. And we've come far in 100 years, but there's so much more we're going to learn eventually. It's all coming out.
Yeah. So this has been a really great conversation, Paul. I thank you for sharing all these stories. And we can do this another time too, and get more stories recorded. Been going for about 70 minutes now. But I'm curious, do you have any recommendations for people to become more active and more awakened and more activated?
Yeah, first of all, I appreciate the conversation. I'm always open to speaking with you and anybody else on these subjects. And I would just recommend to everybody is quiet the mind, because unfortunately, it's a very stressed out world, and money and this and that and obligations. People, they forget and they get caught up in some other time that hasn't happened yet in the future. They have to live in the here and the now. And the best way to do that is to slow down, is to stop, and then learn to meditate, calm your mind down. And then once you get into the, a good routine of meditation, start asking questions before you go to sleep. And most likely you'll get those answers, and definitely start writing down your dreams, because they definitely will. It seems easier for them to contact us when we're in the dream state, because we're not so locked up into the earthly, commotions that go on here every day. So chill out, relax, and then go find a group of like-minded people and keep looking up.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's such a precious window right before we fall asleep to potentially tune ourselves to a journey while we're asleep. Yeah,
definitely. I'm looking forward to next week when we go out to that area. It should be nice with a whole bunch of folks.
Yeah. And if anybody's in the Colorado area, contact me if you want to participate in the events we have here, and you can get more engaged and have some experiences yourself, possibly. So yeah.
Excellent. Right. Look forward to it.
Thanks again, Paul, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Look forward to it as well. Thanks, Mike. Have a great weekend. We'll talk soon.